15 years as an at-the-coalface primary school teacher in South Wales has left me wondering, do we leave children's learning to read to chance? Teaching children to read is the most fundamental thing to get right in any education system. And our invented writing system has allowed us, as a humankind, to permanently record our ideas and save them from being lost or forgotten, allowing us to learn from the very best thought and said. So how well is Wales performing when it comes to teaching reading? Well, we have a pretty good idea, but it doesn't make for pleasant viewing. PISA is an international assessment that compares the performance of students at 15 years of age. And it gives us an indication as to where Wales is at. And there can be no doubt that Wales has serious problems when it comes to teaching our children to read. In 2018, Wales continued to score below the OECD average and significantly below the other UK nations. And although there's been a small increase since 2015, we could attribute this to the fact that there's been an increase in scores for the higher achieving pupils, but the scores for the lower achieving pupils hasn't changed in that time. Therefore, the gap we have between our learners is growing. And Estyn, our school inspectorate in Wales, has published case studies showing secondary schools that have 60% of pupils arriving in year 7 with reading ages of less than 10. Now, how can children learn effectively and access the curriculum when their reading ability is so far behind? It doesn't need to be like this, especially when there's an overwhelming body of evidence showing us what effective reading instruction looks like. Our writing system is a human invention, and the earliest writing systems came into existence around 5,000 years ago. So, unlike our ability to speak, writing and reading are not things that we have naturally evolved to learn how to do. This ingenious idea of representing the sounds in our speech with symbols first began in ancient Iraq and Syria, where marks were made using a stylus in clay tablets to note things down. It was realized that representing the sounds in words with symbols was far more efficient than using a pictographic system. Over the next few thousand years, this developed into the Roman alphabet, which we are familiar with today and use for both Welsh and English, albeit with a few modifications. A good way to explain skilled reading is with the simple view of reading model, first presented by Tunmer and Goff in 1986. Reading comprehension is the ultimate goal, but this first requires children to be able to decode and lift the words off the page. And then if those words are already in their spoken vocabularies, they'll be able to understand those words in print, and they'll be able to understand what they read. Our writing system works logically and efficiently by having the smallest units of sounds in our words represented by letters. For example, the word mat can be segmented into the sounds m, a, t, and these sounds can then be represented by the letters m, a, and t. Therefore, children need to be taught explicitly how this works, how the smallest unit of sound map onto the letters that are used to represent them, and how these sounds can be blended together, enabling them to read any unknown word. In English, this is particularly challenging because there are 44 sounds in the English language, and with 26 letters of the alphabet to work with, this means there are around 175 common ways of spelling those 44 sounds. It's simple, but not simplistic, because in English, a sound can be represented by 1, 2, 3, or 4 letters. A sound can be spelt in different ways, and the same spelling can be used to represent different sounds. Therefore, teachers need to have the knowledge of how all of this works and to teach decoding explicitly in a carefully sequenced way, from simple to complex. And the best bet in order to do this successfully is with systematic synthetic phonics. As it stands, the new curriculum for Wales doesn't provide any preferred method or approach for how reading is taught. And it will continue to be up to each individual school to choose for themselves what approach to reading instruction they use. So what does this mean for parents? Well, it means they unwittingly buy a lottery ticket when their children start school, because every school can choose whichever approach they like to teach reading. Luckily for some, this will mean a well-taught, highly effective, logically sequenced, systematic synthetic phonics program, which means their children will leave the primary setting being able to read well. But sadly for others, they will be at risk of becoming instructional casualties, having been taught a mixed bag of confusing approaches, resulting in them picking up bad habits such as guessing or trying to remember whole words by sight. The remedy for this must be for Welsh Government to insist that all head teachers, and teaching assistants are trained in the science of reading, and to mandate the teaching of systematic synthetic phonics. We need to implement a validated list of these programs for schools to use and to choose from. And we must introduce a phonics screening check in year 1 and a further check in year 3 to check the more complex code, because this will allow us to recognize pupils who need extra support, and it will also allow schools to evaluate and assess the provision that they're giving. Does Curriculum for Wales leave reading to chance? I believe it does. And if you'd like more information about reading instruction, please visit IFERI or the RRF or dyslexics.org.uk.